I would like to call the Joint Committee on Budget and Public Safety to order. It is 1:19 p.m. on Tuesday, March 5, 2024. I would like to welcome our members. We have our co-chair, Okimoto, followed by Councilmember Kia Aina, Councilmember Se, and Councilmember Tupola. We don't have any persons participating remotely by video conference, so for announcements, I'll kick it over to my co-chair, Councilmember Okimoto. Going to call a recess subject to order of the chair.
Testing 1, 2, 3. They can hear now. Okay. Testing. Today is, what is today? Tuesday. Wait, not.
I would like to call the committee on the Joint Committee on Budget and Public Safety back to order. We'll go back to announcements.
Okay, for announcements, pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in 2 ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio when audio feed when prompted. We will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called on. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. We'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, we'll proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, we will first call for objections, and if there are any, we will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, in accordance with HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Members, we need to clarify that the acronym for the Honolulu Emergency Services Department is HESD and not DES as referenced on the agenda.
Thank you, members. We will now take up the agenda item number 1 for action, which is Resolution 24-31. And for the title, I'm going to have my co-chair to announce.
Requesting the Honolulu Emergency Services Department and the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services to update the Honolulu City Council on the current status of the transfer of ambulance services as set forth in Act 208, Session Laws of Hawaii 2021, and to urge the Honolulu Emergency Services Department to complete all necessary steps to ensure that all billable ambulance rides are properly and timely billed. And with us today, we would like to welcome Director of Honolulu Emergency Services Department, Dr. James H.E. Ireland.
Thank you, chairs, and thank you, council members. It's great to be here for the second time today. And ocean safety, great topic, and now EMS, another great topic. Hawaii was very unusual in the way EMS was set up, that the state paid for a county-level service. It was the only state that did that. And Act 208 back in 2021 basically broke off the city and county of Honolulu from that system where now we could regulate and also mostly pay for the system ourselves, but it also allowed us to collect billing. I feel that it gives the county and the city and myself, as well as the council, a lot more maneuverability in the way we deploy our paramedics and EMTs. And what I mean by that is, in the past, you would have to go to the legislature and involve the Department of Health, and it was a long process just to get another ambulance in an area, because you're dealing with two large bodies, the governor, the Department of Health, whereas now with just our department, the city council, the mayor, if assets are needed somewhere, we can get those funded and deployed a lot sooner. So for example, in the 8 years in the previous administration, the only ambulance that was added was Salt Lake. But that was at the expense of taking hours away from Eva Beach, taking hours away from Makiki, and eliminating 2 paramedic rapid response units. So in the end, in that 8 years, it was about a wash as far as adding EMS resources. And this is despite call volume going up every year, minus a little bit during the COVID pandemic. You know, what we've done in the last 3 years is we've restored the ambulance hours to Eva Beach. So it's a 24-hour service now, actually restored and exceeded. We've restored and exceeded the ambulance hours to Makiki. We've opened up an ambulance in Kalihi. We've added back one of the paramedic rapid response units. We've created a new supervisor district for the Central Oahu and the North Shore. So I just think that dealing with this body, 9 members, and the mayor is just much easier. And going forward, same thing. If a council member feels more services are needed in their district, they can come to me, come to the mayor. There's council ads. So there's a lot more freedom to be responsive to the community needs. Now, with respect to the billing, the state sets the billing rates. And I'm going to have to look at my notes here because these numbers. For advanced life support, it's $2,464 per treatment or transport, and for basic life support is $2,194.50. Now, billing in medical field or including ambulance is unlike really any other type of billing. So for instance, when you get a water bill, you pay the whole thing. When you get an electric bill, you pay the whole thing. But when you get a medical bill, we only receive what the insurance carriers are willing to pay. And that's particularly important when you have Medicare and Medicaid patients you take care of, which is about 80% of our ambulance runs, because Medicare pays a little under $600 for a trip. Medicaid pays about $300. So far short, not even 1/3 of the actual bill the state sets. So these rates will go up. There's this large discrepancy, but that's with all medical billing. Now, we also get $30.80 per mile, and then the state also sets a rate for air ambulance transport. So if the city ever operated to the helipad at Queens, for instance, the city could bill $12,485 for that. So that's the billing in a nutshell. We have selected our own billing company through the procurement process. Now, the other way the state set this up is they gave us a gradual stipend that was going to decrease every year. The first year it was about $9 million plus $3.5 million. The next year it was 4.9 plus 3.5. And then in years forward, it'll be 3.5 million ongoing. But what that was done to do is to bridge the gap in what it would take us to get a billing provider, and if there was any potential loss in billing due to that gap. So to date, we've collected or are owed about $48 million, and we expect roughly 20 to 30 more million in collections by July, the end of the fiscal year. So roughly $80 million plus or minus for the first 2 years of operation. And again, we expect the billing revenues to go up because our call volume's going up. We're getting more efficient at billing. We like the company we're working with. But at the same time, we also recognize that stipend has gone down and will go down to $3.5 million a year perpetually. And this is against a 25 budget that we're proposing of about $40 million for EMS.
Thank you, Director Ireland. Members, are there any questions? We have Councilmember Tupola.
Hi, Director Ireland. Quick question, and I know this might be a retro question. So when we absorbed some of this from the state, there was these reports that it was about a $50 million expense. They were operating like $20 million in the hole. Was that also because of reimbursement or lack of getting reimbursement, or was it other things? And has that also played into it? I know we're specifically talking about how do we get the reimbursements for using the ambulances, but we absorbed a lot more than that. Are there other deficits that we should consider, that this could possibly help if we bill correctly?
Well, I think one of the things our paramedics are doing is we're much more keyed into at the time of the transport, after patient care is done, after they get to the hospital, on making sure they get a good ID, an insurance card if they have one, so we get the best data immediately to the billing company to capture the charges that are owed based on our billing. So I think we're doing a much better job of that, and that's a continual quality improvement process. But I think that alone will capture probably an additional $5 to $10 million a year that the state wasn't capturing. And then the other thing we're faced with is just increasing call volume. So just by the virtue of calls going up 5 to 10% per year, we'll capture more billing with that. But at some point, you have to add resources to keep up with that call, and that's why we asked for 2 additional ambulances in town in last year's budget to help with that call volume.
A follow-up question. I know I think there's just one or maybe a few private ambulance companies. I know because I have one in my neighborhood. How many contracted ambulances do you have that are not yours, but you guys use?
So there is one other ambulance provider in the state of Hawaii, American Medical Response. They have actually the county 911 contracts in Maui, and Kauai County. So they're the only providers in those two counties. On the Big Island and on the island of Oahu, they back up the primary 911 provider. So on the Big Island, it's the Hawaii Fire Department, and for Oahu, it's the City and County of Honolulu EMS. What they do is generally on Oahu, intra-facility transfers, so from like hospital to hospital or nursing home to hospital. They have a contract at the airport with the state of Hawaii, but we also have what's called a backup contract with them. So they provide us with 3 12-hour ambulances a day to cover our surge. We don't pay for that, but they are allowed to bill the patients they transfer under the state guidelines. So they accept the risk to provide the service for free, but then they're allowed to do the billing. When we were under the state, what we previously did is we actually paid AMR for each of those transfers. I think it was somewhere around $600 or $700. Whether the patient had insurance or not, the city still paid them, and we had a line item for that in our budget. But now it's worked out where they help us, and we help them sometimes too when they need ambulances. I think it's also worth noting that we also have an agreement with the federal fire department. They have paramedic ambulances on Oahu, and we go on base to help them, and they come off base to help us. There's no charge either way. Although if we do transport patients that come off base, we do give them a bill just like anybody else in the city and county. My understanding is if you get transported by a federal fire department ambulance, there is no bill. But that adds on any given day an extra 10 or more ambulances in the system in addition to our 22 that we can use in the event that we're running short or there's a disaster.
Yeah, no, they're definitely needed, and we're glad because it's near our home. But they're always helping where they can. Is a setup like that or organization like that need to expand, or right now they're basically filling the gaps that you guys need?
I think we're in a pretty good place right now. We do have plans based on last year's budget to add one more ambulance in town, and I think that would be good for right now. But I think if we look out over the next 5 years. We probably need an ambulance, if I'm just thinking about the island, in the Waikane area, the Sunset Beach area,
yep.
Monowili, also probably Makaha, probably the Ko'olina area, Pearl City, and probably 1 or 2 more in town. Actually, maybe that's over 10 years. But we probably need to add 1 or 2 ambulances, probably 1 ambulance a year for the next 10 years to keep up with the call volume and the growth and to keep response times short.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would also like to recognize Councilmember Wire as well as Council Chair Waters. And I would like to also kick it over to Co-Chair Okimoto for questions.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Testing? That's not working.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Aloha, I'm Director Ireland. If you could repeat, I know you kind of gave a background of the information from the transfer. I had several questions about this transfer from when EMS, the whole transfer of the state here. How much of the EMS was transferred to the city and county when all of the changes happened?
Basically everything, and it was the regulatory aspects were transferred to us. How we deploy the system was now our responsibility, but also it was our responsibility to pay for the system with that graded stipend that goes down to now $3.5 million a year. I just wanted to add one other quick thing that, in the administrative rules previously that have now expired, the city does have the right to change the billing structure. The council could make a rate higher or lower for ambulance services. But also there's this idea of treat, no transport. And what that means is if we were to go to a car accident and someone says, just check me out, paramedic does a head-to-toe assessment, takes vital signs, writes a report, probably a half-hour worth of work. We have about 15,000 of those calls a year that we do not bill for. Now, under the previous state administrative rules, we could have billed for those, and it was somewhere around, I think, around $1,000. And those have since expired. But this body could set up a rate for treat, no transport, and so could the state again. And I think $1,000 might be a little high, but for those calls that we're going on where we don't ultimately take somebody to the hospital, there is a mechanism that we can bill for those. And again, we're not out to gouge anybody, but we do and, a lot of our folks are kapuna, and, we don't want to set anybody back. And one of the other things we're working on is a forgiveness program where we can alleviate some of the bill pressure if people are unable to pay or don't have insurance. So that's really important to me to make sure, we don't necessarily hurt someone with an ambulance bill. The other thing is we go to medical alarms. So people pay to have a service where they push a button and a mainland for-profit company calls 911 for them and sends us to the house. Many of those are false alarms, and we go and nobody's there.
To my mind as you were talking. From the original question I asked when everything was transferred to the city, and now now billing, staffing is all under you and the city.
Yes.
How much of that has been completed? Is everything done? Your department is running completely on its own with equipment, staffing, facilities, everything got transferred?
Pretty seamless. I think we hired a couple more billing clerks to help make sure that we're capturing the revenue that's owed to us. But otherwise, it was pretty seamless, and we didn't have to add a lot of positions. As you know, we did add in last budget 2 ambulances for town, and of course we've grown in core and ocean safety, but those are different divisions.
Okay, and going back to, we talked about the funds, or the payments. You mentioned so much, 15% or 15,000 calls go out. Maybe they don't get all provided for, they're not all paid. So how much of this, how much is the city having to subsidize for these EMS calls that go out there? And I remember when we met last year, you talked about a lot of it, was unfortunately those people who may be houseless at this time, they call. So what percentage of these calls and these ambulance visits are being subsidized because they're not paid for properly or at all?
Very roughly, we have about 55,000 transports a year that we bill at that state rate. But again, when we're only collecting, about $600, a little less than $600 from Medicare and $300 from Medicaid, and those are our 80% of our patients, we're having to subsidize heavily those 2 types of calls to some degree. Now, the 15,000 calls where we go to the scene, but we don't even transport anybody, those are all done currently at no charge. And so if we did apply even a charge of $100 or $200 times 15,000, and again, we're not going to collect 100% of that, but that's a significant amount of money in the millions.
Okay, thank you. And when we talk about the revenue generated, the funds that are collected, do these funds go directly to EMS and the city, or does it go to the state? State general fund? Where is the money going? The funds that are collected? They
go to the city general fund, as well as the stipends that we got, in the graded stipends we got from the state, all goes into the city general fund.
Okay. And in your mind, is this the most efficient way? We mentioned, you talked about the other counties, and I know that every county is unique in our own ways, but looking at the other counties, are there ways that we can learn, practices that we can adopt into our system here to make it more efficient so that we don't have such large lapses in payment or having to subsidize so much from the city?
One of the things, I believe the state legislature is able to change the Medicaid rate. So if they legislated a higher Medicaid rate, for doctors too, because I hear that complaint from the physicians in the community. I think California has looked at that. I don't know if they've done that, but instead of $300, if we got $500 and we're getting 20,000 Medicare transfers a year, hypothetically, that's a significant amount of funds that could be legislated so we get additional funding. The other counties are so different. For instance, like on Lanai, they hardly run any calls. So unless you build $100,000 per transport, they would always need a subsidy. Even Kauai and rural Maui, they just run so few calls that they have to be subsidized. Now, it doesn't have to be by the state. It could be just the counties subsidize it through their tax revenue. But right now, the other 3 counties are all under the jurisdiction of the DOH in the state.
Okay. Thank you, Director Lane. Thank you, Co-Chair Cordero.
Thank you, Co-Chair Okimoto. Members, are there any other questions before the chair? Okay, we have Councilmember Say, followed by Council Chair Waters.
Dr. Ireland, Dr. Ireland, in a perfect world, what would you like to see in the next 2 to 4 years? The council maybe increasing the fees, or you folks increasing the fees to plan that the acquisition of new ambulances, the increase in personnel et cetera, to provide more services. And maybe a study that purports that if we have a ambulance service, let's say in Queens Hospital, I wanted you to determine how we can cut the timeline from the point of the accident to a particular hospital. You know what I'm trying to get at? Or in the future, are you looking at maybe air medical responses? Your thoughts? You know what I'm saying? If there's a big accident in Kahuku, Sacred Falls, and you have your helicopter, it's just thinking out there about how do you foresee this particular department moving ahead?
You know, we have such great paramedics, lifeguards too, and what they tell me is they're too busy. Their call volume's too high. You know, we have our downtown ambulances running sometimes 18 calls in 12 hours. And so really, I feel the weight of trying to get more units on the road, but that's not only a funding issue, but we have gotten funding, so I appreciate that, but it's also how fast we can train and hire and retain people. And I think our academy is helping. We've got a new EMS academy, so we're training our own, plus getting from KCC. So I think my focus in EMS is really to be how we add more units to the system in a controlled manner, and really the same with ocean safety. I know we need, you know, ideally more towers and more jet skis. We did the extended hours program. So it's kind of the same theme, but that's the feedback I get from our paramedics. Now, with respect to air, when I started in EMS in the early and mid 90s, the medevac here did that service for free, the Army. We had war, they went away, and they never came back. There are models for aeromedical service. You know, Maui has a public-private, I think, partnership where the state, I think, pays for 75% of that medevac on Maui. That would be something I think here that we could look at, whether it be a city asset or a private asset that we may or may not subsidize. I think we're getting more and more calls for emergency transfers from Kahuku Hospital. We get one call a day at least from the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center for an emergency transfer. Labor, active labor, strokes, big heart attacks. And not all of these types of patients are appropriate for air transport, but it could definitely shorten the transfer time to Queens or one of the downtown hospitals. And then that's not even counting the major accidents. So we've had major accidents, you know, Sunset Beach, Waianae, Ka'ava, where sometimes there's 4 or more critical patients. And having a helicopter we could put 1 or 2 of the sickest patients in and go right to the helipad at Queens would make a lot of difference. And then that also saves 1 ambulance for the scene to take care of everybody else. So I think aeromedical is something that is on our radar. And so I look forward to talking to you folks about that more.
Madam Chair, just one final question. Have we lowered the costs of overtime for your EMTs and paramedics?
I can get that for you, but our staffing has been the best it's been probably in 20 years. Our vacancy rate is the best it's been that anyone can remember. And that's, again, a testament to our team with aggressive hiring through our own academy and KCC. And so, you know, but again, we're at the same time, we're trying to expand and we're adding ambulances. And so right here today, I can't say it's great, but I can get you those numbers.
There's no need to. Just that I would share with you the thought would be that when you show us the savings on your overtime, you extrapolate that overtime monies into something else within your department.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Say, and that is actually something we would love to hear during the departmental budget briefings. Okay, all right, so Council Chair Waters.
Thank you very much, and forgive me, I was late, so if you went through this already, it would be helpful to do it one more time. So my understanding is in fiscal year 2022, the city received $46,171,411 from the state. In fiscal year 2023, it was $8,900,000 and some change. In fiscal year 24, it was $4,452,249. And this fiscal year, we're not going to receive any money from the state, with the exception of the $3.5 million that you mentioned for administrative subsidies, right?
Right, and we also got that $3.5 million with the 8.9 and the 4.5.
with the
So yes, that's-
8.9 and the 4.5.
Those, the first two numbers you mentioned, that we got that plus the 3.5.
Right, plus
Yep.
3.5. But this year, we're not going to get any of that, with the exception of the 3.5 million for
Correct.
administrators. Okay. So how much does it cost to run the ambulance system?
Well, our budget for EMS, which we'll talk about, I believe, next week, I think we're proposing $40 million. And not everything is included in that. It's the EMS budget. The administration is separate from that. But again, our EMS administration also covers ocean safety and core. So it's a little bit apples and oranges, but for just the EMS budget, it's $40 million. We predict we can collect about $40 million a year, plus or minus $2 million.
So we predict, but what exactly did we collect this
Well,
past-
so far,
last year?
So far, we've collected $48 million, either collected or what's owed to us from that stipend. And then as of July, we expect about 20 to 30 million more. So it'll be right at around 80 million plus or minus for the first 2 years.
Okay.
Maybe more, maybe as much as $10 million more, but I'm being conservative.
So one of our concerns initially was when the state transferred the economic burden, the cost to us, we were concerned that taxpayers would have to subsidize the program. What you're telling me now is that if we're collecting 48 million and it costs 40 million, there's a profit of approximately 8 million.
You know, I would never say we were profitable per se, but you know, what it did is, you know, we were collecting, I want to say about $32 million before a year when the state had this. Through improved efficiency, we think we can get about $5 to $10 million or more a year. So I think it will approximately closer to what the actual cost is to run the service. Taxpayers paid for it before, taxpayers paid for it now, but the difference is which taxpayers, you know, the state through GET and TAT versus city through now some TAT and real property tax.
And is the cost, as far as what we charge the user, the customer, is that determined by administrative rule or by ordinance?
Right now, we're using the state billing rate, which for advanced life support is $2,464, $2,464. However, Medicare and Medicaid don't cover that much. What they pay is about $300 for Medicaid and roughly a little under $600 for Medicare, and that's roughly 80% of our transport. So because of these government-based insurances set their rates, we could have a bill for $10,000 and they're still only going to pay what they pay. Now, that's why I mentioned legislative action potentially could change the Medicaid rate at the state level for all providers, including any other ambulance company or even doctors for that matter, to improve the reimbursement from that line item.
But if we're running 8 million in the black, there doesn't seem to be a need to have to raise the rate for Medicare and Medicaid, right?
Well, you know, definitely we don't look at this as a profit center. We look at this as a life-saving service, but and no other first responder agency would even be able to come close to recouping their expenses. But we do feel, because it's medical care and generally medical care is billed and insurance covers it, we should capture the revenue that's owed us. But I don't know if we would ever end up in the black. I mean, it's profitable, but it's possible because the private ambulance services that operate all over the country, they don't have any other choice to operate except in the black unless they get a stipend.
Well, I'm just using your numbers because, again, my concern was that without the state subsidy, we're going to have to use real property tax revenues to subsidize the ambulance. But based on the numbers that you're reporting to the council today, is if it costs $40 million to run the ambulance system, but the revenue or the amount that we're collecting is $48 million, then there's no need to increase Medicare or Medicaid. Right? I mean, especially if we're talking about charging our kupuna, let's not charge them if we don't have to.
Well, just to be clear, 48 million was over 18 months, not 1 year. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So 48 million to date, but that's an 18-month window, and we expect 20 to 30 million more. So in July of this year, we're expecting about an $80 million recovery, plus or minus $10 million.
Okay, can you break it down and make it even more simpler? If it costs $40 million a year, how much are we collecting in the fiscal year? Let's just use FY23 as an example.
You know, it's going to be more because of the stipend was high. But I think what's most important is going forward without the stipend, what we're going to collect. And the best estimate I have right now is about $40 million a year.
I see. Was the State Department of Health doing the collections, not the city, before they transferred it over to us?
The state had a third-party vendor,
I see.
and we met with them as the city, with that vendor, maybe once a year. With our current vendor, we meet with them, I think, every week.
I see. That's why you're saying we predict that this amount will be collected, but we don't really know because the state was doing the collections? Is that what
Correct.
it is?
We have an idea, but we think our relationship with the new vendor, we can do better.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First off, in the resolution, you see that there is mention about the July to October 2022 billing that was not able to be recovered. Has that recovered? I mean, has that been recovered from July 2022 to October 2022?
So what she's referring to is, to get a Medicare number, we had to have a billing company, and that had to go through the procurement process. So that wasn't instantaneous. And that's part of the reason why the state gave us such a high stipend in the beginning, because they knew there was a chance there'd be a window of time when we wouldn't be able to collect revenues. So to answer your question, those are under appeal. We're waiting for the Medicare to answer the appeal if we can do and collect those older billings.
Okay, so 0% of that has been recovered because it's under appeal.
I can't say zero, but there's a period of time that is still under appeal.
Okay, understood. And is it only between those few months of time, or is it even older billing?
I'd have to look. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And so, other than the older billings, is the city current or up to date with its billing of emergency ambulance services?
They are, but there's always a lag because the patient goes to the hospital, the paperwork gets collected, it gets sent to the billing company, there's a time lag to it to get sent out. So current in the sense that it goes out now fairly promptly, but there's always a little lag. But I think there was some catch up because they had so much older billing to do when they first came on board. But I think in the next 3 months, by the end of the fiscal year, we'll be caught up.
Okay, and speaking of collected and with the budget just released in the detailed statement of revenues and surplus in the executive program for fiscal year 25, we see that the under C5, that the ambulance fees collected and deposited into the general fund was $197,498 for fiscal year 23. And then it's anticipated to be collected of $32 million in FY24 and $35 million in FY25. And if it's with that, with the ambulance fees charged in FY23 consistent and those anticipated in FY24 and 25 for the amount uncollected in FY23, which once again appears to be 31 million, how much of that amount was collected and how much is unrecoverable?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to get back to you on that because, again, the appeal period is still under appeal, so we may actually get all of that. But just again, you know, we have 55,000 transports a year. So at the current, just even at $2,000 a trip, if people paid the full bill, that would be $110 million a year.
How long is this appeal going to last?
No, but I mean, just what I'm saying though is we would never, even if it's 110 million for the whole year outstanding, with what Medicare and Medicaid pay, we would never collect that much. I think probably the best case scenario would be about 40 million. Because I think when you take all medical billing across the board, when you have a substantial mix of Medicare and Medicaid payers, you collect about only 1/3 of what you bill. And that's same for doctors and hospitals as well as ambulance services. But as far as your specific questions, I can get back that to you in writing because I want to be accurate.
Okay, understood. Thank you. I know you mentioned briefly relating to the discussion about the EMS fees that we had when we were talking about the transfer from the state. And would you be able to go into a little bit more about that? I know that we're still kind of figuring that out because we don't want to nickel and dime people, but what are the fees that we're looking at now?
Well, the fees is basically what we get paid for is to take somebody to the hospital, and we bill the insurance companies. If they don't have insurance, we send them a cash bill. Again, we got the graded stipend over the last 3 years. We get the $3.5 million a year, and that's actually attached to car registration. So our argument was if you're going to put a fee on a car registration for EMS on Oahu, we should get a piece of that, and that's where that $3.5 million comes. But going forward, if you were looking for other opportunities to generate revenue for the city and for EMS, the raising the actual rate would only affect commercial payers, Kaiser, HMAA, HMSA, and then no-fault insurance and workman's comp. Medicare and Medicaid, you wouldn't get a penny more. In theory, if that were to go up, we made a higher rate, we could collect anywhere from maybe $2 to $4 million more dollars a year. But the treat no transport, those 15,000 calls a year, if we did attach a bill to that, $100 or even $200, potentially that would also generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $4 million a year. So there's opportunities for revenue. It's just a matter of what is fair for the public, what's fair for the city. And again, we're not trying to be a revenue generating operation, but it is nice to be able to recoup some of the fees for users so the taxpayer base doesn't have to pay for the ambulance service per se.
Thank you. And in what time period are you looking to possibly implement such no transfer, treat no transfer fees?
Well, because the administrative rule expired at the state, unless they re-engage that and put it back in place, we would have to do it through council. I'm always willing to talk about it, but again, what's fair, what's the constituency going to say to that, and how much revenue will it actually generate? So I think it's all something that's worth discussing in the future, whether it's tomorrow or next week or in a few months. Up to you folks.
And my question, and you mentioned that you have a great relationship with the billing company or contract that you have now, and if you could share a little bit about that and what the structure is like between the company or contract that you have.
Sure. I'm going to have to look up the name. It's EMS Management and Consultants, EMSMC.
EMSMC.
From when I initially met with them, it was my understanding they bill for about 60 other ambulance companies across the country. But I met with them, and my team has met with them regularly since they were successful in the procurement of the contract. Previous to them, when the state billing company was in place, I don't think I can remember personally ever meeting with them once. And so, again, there's this engagement because they want us to succeed and we want to succeed. And the other thing is the way we set up the contract is they only get paid if the bill is collected, if we receive the payment. So they have also a measure to encourage them to be successful with the billing because otherwise they don't get paid.
Okay, understood. And how is it different from how the past billing contract that the state managed prior to this?
I don't know a lot about that, so I don't really want to misspeak.
Okay.
But that was managed by the state. But again, I had never even met with them previously, the previous biller or the state on that matter. But we're, again, very much engaged with them now that we're responsible for the billing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Say, and then followed by Co-Chair Okimoto.
Yeah, Dr. Ireland, just one final thought that I have, and this is a philosophical one. Okay, HESD is not in the business of making a profit, but can you make a profit to pay for the current expenses for the out years now? That's what I'm trying to get at. All of our expenses that you have to calculate, your collective bargaining, your new equipment, all of this will be increasing.
Yes.
So I'm saying, have we looked at how we're going to be applying these increases to what the fees are today so that we are ahead of the game.
No, totally agree. So collective bargaining is going up, which I'm happy about. Our paramedics deserve it. Ambulance prices are going up. But at the same time, the state rate for ambulance is going up by 10% a year. They set that in administrative rule. Again, though, Medicare and Medicaid, we're not going to collect that extra 10%, but for the other 20%, we will. So that will offset it somewhat, as well as increasing call volume. So there is some mechanism built in to recoup those costs, but they are definitely increasing costs for sure.
And the next question, if it's possible, can we use these type of monies from the insurance to be used for HFDs, automobiles that go to these medical emergencies sometimes also? They're ahead of you folks before you folks do show up. When we get, when we attend the neighborhood boards, we had about 5 or 6 medical emergencies that we had to go and check it out. Can you use your monies to buy those automobiles or SUVs or whatever it is to help HFD? Because they're not in the business of making it a bottom line money. You know what I'm trying to get? I'm trying to
sure.
see money from here to pay for this. That's all.
HFD has medical response capabilities. They use medical supplies. So does Ocean Safety. They go on medical calls. They use oxygen and things. We probably need all of our money, to be honest, to support what we're doing in EMS. But if we did have a surplus, and I guess everything's on the table. But we work very, very well with police, fire, and Ocean Safety, the other first responders in the county, and it's all for the common goal. Whether it's a cardiac arrest or a car accident or a rescue, and it's not all jurisdictions are like that. There's different issues with different places, but it's so wonderful here, the support that we get and we give each other, that it's really just a pleasure to work in the system.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Councilmember Dos Santos Tam to the committee. All right, Co-Chair Okimoto.
Thank you, Co-Chair Cordero. Really quickly, Dr. Ireland, you mentioned something earlier. You talked about those cases that you're still trying to recoup or get back. And the RESO really talked about the importance of having the billing properly done, the ambulance rights properly and timely billed. Can you quickly explain to us what kind of timelines we're looking at now and what would be the most feasible so that we are not looking at these long waits to have the costs recouped? What are we looking at right now for timelines to get them, and what would be, in your mind, a timely manner to get the ambulance costs collected?
I'll get back to you on the exact details, and really the gap was because of the time it took to procure a company, and that company to then apply for a Medicare certificate for the city and county, and that was just the delay inherent in taking over the system. So that initial gap we shouldn't see again unless we change billing companies. And the billing company has a 1-year contract, I think, with 4 or 5 extensions possible. So as long as we're happy with them, that shouldn't happen. But just rough guess, if we get the money in our coffers within 3 months of the ambulance call, I think that's pretty good.
And right now, is that what we're seeing? So you're saying about 3 months? Is that?
That's what I'd like. I'd have to get back to you on what we're seeing.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Director Ireland. Thank you, Co-Chair Cordero.
Members, any other questions? Members, any other questions? Okay. We'll come back to discussion. I'll head over to testimony next. Thank you, Director Ireland. So first up, we don't have any registered testifiers, but I see Angela Young.
Aloha, Angela Melody Young on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security Walk. So one of the purposes of this resolution is to resolve that education would be provided about Act 208 relating to public health to create medical equity for all citizens. And I want to talk about all the way at the bottom of page 2, there's requested a briefing to the council on the transition of services as set forth by this act. So reading the governor's message 1336 about Act 208, the act transfers responsibilities from the state to the city while appropriating funds for the Special Fund and the American Rescue Plan Act. The Act upgrades HRS 46 and 321 and 46 is about advanced life support and basic life support, and 321 is about the retention of relevant documentation. So this is a chapter about parameters of Department of Health to maintain public data and epidemiology information for all emergency medical care provided statewide. The information is used to plan and evaluate strategies to prevent illnesses, is a tool for the management of public health. And we have to think about the HIPAA Privacy Act from the federal U.S. HHS office, which appropriates safeguards to protect privacy and to set limits and conditions on the uses and disclosure that may be made of such information without an individual's authorization. DOH adheres to the HIPAA Act as per Chapter 321-6.5 clinical laboratory test results.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. You're in support, right? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else online who wishes to testify? Seeing none, we are now taking up in-person testifiers. Is there anyone in person who wishes to testify? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Members, we are back in discussion. Members, I'm still entertaining questions from the members. No? Okay, Councilmember Say.
Are we almost completed with the hearing? No, not yet. I just wanted to make a...
Oh, are you trying to kick us out? Just
Oh,
kidding.
no. I just wanted to make a statement that I think we should all be very proud of for Dr. Ireland in helping one of those lobbyists that had the cardiac arrest here. Just wanted to say thank you very much for your service in saving that individual.
You know, thank you for that. And that happens every day on Oahu, and our teams respond to that. And those are tough calls, and to happen here suddenly, you know, and look, our team, fire department, EMS, they got here in 5 minutes, but we were able, you know, the AD, whoever brought it, thank you, and just right place at the right time. But thank you for your thank you. Just we always have to be ready, and I'm glad you folks have taken CPR and know where the ADs are, and hopefully we'll never need it again. But it's that was something, and we'll see when let us know when he gets his bill. And then we'll have some more information.
Yeah, real life
But great outcome. You know, anytime someone can walk away from a cardiac arrest and leave the hospital, basically, essentially a normal person, we were, you know, that's a win for us.
Yes, thank you. Members, we're still in discussion. Any discussion on this item or any further questions for the director? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, members. The co-chairs would like to recommend that Resolution 24-31 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.